Hello everyone at Wednesday Night Poetry. My name is MeghaSood. I'm a poet, writer, editor, and a literary activist based in Jersey City, New Jersey. Today I'm going to be reading few poems of mine, and I'm very thankful to Kai Coggin for giving me this opportunity and platform for sharing my work. Today I'm going to be reading poems from my recently published chapbook, My Body Is Not an Apology by Finishing Line Press, and also my upcoming full-length poetry collection, My Body Lives Like a Thread by Flower Song Press. I hope everyone is doing well and they enjoy my work. So I'm going to be opening this reading with the first poem of mine, which is called My Body Is Not an Apology. It's the title poem from my chapbook, which is by Finishing Line Press. My body is not an apology. This body, my body, is not an apology. It's a prayer. Forgiveness wrapped in the filigrane's end of my skin, frayed at the ends, battered for so long by your pointy convictions, and cookie-cutter rules which try to shape and mold this body along. My body is not an apology. It doesn't desire to fit in a frame mapped inch by inch, else to be ashamed. My body is not an apology. It's a roar, a declaration, an unapologetic, unabashed straight truth in your face, a war cry, a deafening scream from the silence. My body is not an apology. This body will not be mapped as a benchmark for beauty, an attempt to hide the crow's feet or the spider veins from your wild eyes and your forked tongue. My body is not an apology, but a safe haven, an epitome of affection and metaphor for crimson love that flows in my veins for years to come. My body is not an apology. It's an eye of the storm, a dance of distraction, a safe haven for life, forgiveness in disguise. With love neatly folded in the wrinkles of my skin, warmth oozing from every pore of my being, a lesson etched in every single crow's feet, forgiveness written through every inch of my spiral veins. This body is not an apology, but a profound lesson, a triumphant proclamation, an unfettered declaration. The next poem which I'm going to read is called The Day the Town Celebrated, and I wrote this poem in response to the honor killings which happens around the world. The day the town celebrated. A stone thrown in a silent lake breaks its skin. Pain travels like ripples, an outward fractal of grief, continuously growing by every passing moment. A single shot piercing through their soft bodies, piecing them with hate, stringing the town. Truth gaping through the open wound, a lone gunfire shredding the sky into a million screams. Only in this version, love was not ostracized, but burned and hanged in the town square, hanged like pieces of meat for the devouring eyes circling them, a prized possession for the caste that rules with an iron fist. A mother runs half naked through the empty street, wailing, anger fracturing the thatched roofs, pain scratched like a pellicle dissolving in acid, its stench carried for generations, like folklore passed on from one babbling tongue to another. How the little town's gazed gaping mouth like a blind cave. The time when love was not ostracized, caste and creed were thrown aside, when that small town gathered to celebrate the honor killing. The next poem which I'm going to read is actually, it poses a question to the readers. And the question is in the title itself. It's called, Does Hurt Have a Gender? And I want the readers of the poem, I want the listeners of this poem to think about this. that the does hurt have a gender? What does the body want when it breaks down into a million pieces? Its pulverized existence wanting acceptance, only to be ignored and walked over, left over like a day's old milk on the kitchen counter, forgotten and left to curdle. Why do we keep numbing the sharp pain, the knotted lamentation caught in our hungry mouths, which cuts our soul both ways and leaves us to bleed in this world, profused with sweat and blood, a moment undescribable? Leaking and soaking the ridges of the curbside, here the thickness of your blood, its viscosity, and the gravitas of your speech depends on the color of your skin, a pain untenable. An unsurmountable pain rising in my mouth, a dichotomy between pain and acceptance, a desire abominable. Does scream have a religion too? Do cries have a race? Does hurt have a gender? Do wounds have a nationality? Does your tongue curl into sin when you call out my name? Does the triteness of the ideologies still mollify your pain? The next poem is called An Act of Self-Defense, and I wrote it in memory of Ahmad Arbery. The exact moment when the grief takes shelter in your heart and leaves you undone, when the emptiness sits in the gaping hole, an abyss of loneliness. The deafening lull in your mind stops making sense. The only loss which makes sense are the lonely wails of the widow in the apartment above you. Sorrow takes a different shape when your tears starting pouring for the senseless acts of violence and cowardice carried by the very educated hands of this land, where life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness are foundations of society. The sidewalks of those are now pitted with the black bones of their own. You are not carrying your freedom in your arms, your right to bear arms, when the only right you have given to a mother is to stick a cross in the middle of an unknown street, giving a piece of land for her dead son, when there is nothing but death at the end of a gun. When the names keep adding to the unnamed list, Trevon, Michael, Eric, Brianna, and so on. An ever-growing list of dead and forgotten, where names have to scream out loud to make their lives matter, or else all hell will break loose. To hell with your rights to the Second Amendment when it's laced with the blood of a black brother whose murder you are incessantly trying to justify as self-defense. The next two poems which I'm going to read is from my upcoming debut poetry full-length collection called My Body Lives Like a Thread. It's open for pre-orders right now at the Flower Song Press website, and it's going to be published in December 2021. And the collection is called My Body Lives Like a Thread. And the first poem I'm going to be reading from it, it's the title poem, is called My Body Lives Like a Thread. A wound opens its mouth and becomes self-inflicting, just like the night in its extreme, vulnerable to a ray of light, its existence challenged, and yet it stands bravely, unfettered to the challenges of the dawn. As I catch the words in my mouth, my language becomes an open threat, my razor speech falling sharp on your dull convictions. We always expose our deepest and softest parts to heal. That's how the body learns to heal, to grow. To be vulnerable is an elegy for acceptance. We have hunger written all over us, with the ink as black as the mole on your shoulder, challenging the frothiness of the moonlight. My unspoken words sit like a welt on my tongue in this foreign world. Every time I twist my tongue to shape a word, I mispronounce your fear, a new threat is born. And the next poem which I'm going to be reading is called Hope. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. It's a quote by Emily Dickinson. Hope. Hope, seated in the eyes of a child waiting on its doorstep, a blackening elbow of a mother on a windowsill. Hope lingers and hope stays as it rises in the back of your throat like a haunting serenade. Hope is the first feel of earth and sliver of light, a soft announcement as the back of your half-open eyes. Hope lives in the touch of the toes meeting the soft ground that your spindly legs seek feverishly at the break of the dawn. Hope, deep-seated in the dewdrops, satiating the thirst of hummingbirds, fluttering its wings, making a symphony, a mellifluous unison with nature, poetry in all its being. Hope is in the bleary eyes of a black mother, opening door to his son at the end of a long day, a day well spent, a day when his life, resting at the edge of a trigger-hungry fingers, has been spared to live another day. Hope is when you don't get to hear racial slurs as passing comments on a lonely, deserted road to home, making another dime for nation built on the false desires of life, liberty, and happiness, resonating inside you like a filthy swear all along. Hope is when your life gets spared, not shred to pieces, or left to the wolves lining the sidewalks, those deafening catcalls, not scaring your memories to leave you haunting after all. Hope is when the body realizes that it is not an apology, but an unfettered declaration, prayer to heal the soft part of your soul, not to meaninglessly bleed another day in damnation. Hope is when you realize that only you hold the lien to your soul, a queen of your desires and dream, a life full of eternal possibilities for all. An unabashed declaration, an invisible crown you adorn, the path seeded with the blood of those whose shoulders you stand on. Hope is when they look up to you, with their eyes pitted with shining light of thousand summer sun, soaked in the sweat and blood of your ancestors, like a clarion call and a timeless beacon. Hope is the silver dreams etched in your spine, sweat like the calligraphy of pain undefined, paving the way for millions that wants you to carry on. Hope is the songbird that trills in your soul, sings without the words, and never stops at all. Now, for the last poem of this reading, I want to close with a personal favorite of mine, which is called We All Rise Out of Love. And I personally think that empathy and compassion is the need of the hour. It's something we all need in this time, in this tumultuous times when we are living in our own versions of reality. And empathy is a very important tool, and poetry is one of the tools which stimulates empathy. We all rise out of love. My tongue twists and turns, trying to fit the cookie cutter in a land unknown, the words put in my mouth, like the small portions, those cores, made by warm, supple hands of my mother, gently waiting for the next one. Her fingers, always doused by the fragrance of the bay leaves, turmeric tainted, the various shades, as she kneads the atta and dispense the life lessons in the kitchen on a warm summer day. She taught me, kindness comes from the heart, but hunger pierces a man the most. So learn to soothe hunger, the lingering pain, as she puts all her strength to knead the atta into a dollop of the milky moon. My language is different than yours. I try fervently to explain to my son, who keeps correcting my pronunciation, as I teach him the basics of love, kindness, and purity of heart. Sometimes I wonder how this world, marred and demarcated by the boundaries, those twisted pronunciations, would look beautiful kneaded together, like the lump of moon sitting in the copper clad parath of my mother, waiting to rise out of form. Thanks everyone for listening.